Well, Apple is expected to unveil a new iPhone SE. This would contribute to a pivotal time for the tech giant's smartphone business as it continues to work on its AI strategy. Apple reportedly partnering with Alibaba to bring AI features for iPhones in China, according to the information. Here with more on the key moving pieces of growth for Apple, we have Technalysis Research President and Chief Analyst, that's Bob O'Donnell. Bob, always great to see you and have you on the show. Let's start with the hardware, Bob, because this new revamped iPhone SE, Bob, we have reports saying this device is coming really any day now. If and when it does, Bob, what would you expect demand to be like for a device like that? What would you expect the contribution to be to the overall iPhone franchise?
Well, look, Josh, first of all, thanks for having me. The SE has never been a huge part of the iPhone market in terms of a percentage, but there's a very distinct group of people who just don't really like huge phones. And the SE has served that market. I happen to know one because my wife has been like that. She's never liked the big phones. She always wants the smaller SE type phones. And there's plenty of other people like her. And so the SE is generally way out of date when it comes to the technology in terms of the processor or the camera. So all the rumors point to basically an SE that has the capabilities of the latest iPhones, but again, in that tiny small form factor and at a significantly lower price. So, and of course, it'll add USB-C, and Apple has to do that for Europe because you have to have USB-C there now. And a lot of people are getting used to USB-C connectors for power adapters and everything else. So Apple checks off a whole bunch of boxes with this SE. Again, I don't think it has a huge impact in terms of the total sales, but it definitely fills an important niche in the product lineup.
Do you think, Bob, there would be certain markets, certain regions where you would expect such a device to be more popular than others? For example, do you think it could prove a winner in the emerging markets?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a sub $500 in the US iPhone, new, right? And in a lot of those emerging markets, the only way you can get an iPhone close to that is the used market. Of course, there is a relatively robust used market in some of these emerging markets. But yes, the SE clearly is targeted towards some of those emerging markets as well. And those are obviously very important to Apple. So yes, I think we'll continue to see it. Again, this would be the fourth generation of the SE. So it's not like it's a brand new category or segment there. It's something that's existed. And I would imagine it, you could look historically at what the SE has done. People have modeled those out. And it's going to be probably relatively similar. Again, adds a lot of the nice new capabilities. They'll give it a bump for sure initially because of that. And then it'll kind of fit into the overall pattern of the iPhone.
Well, let's switch from hardware to software, Bob, because the other news with Apple was this big headline from the information saying that Apple is planning to partner with Alibaba to bring AI features to Apple products in China. Interested to get your take on that news, Bob.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this is something that we knew had to be coming, not necessarily with Alibaba, but in order for Apple to bring Apple Intelligence to China, they were going to have to find a Chinese partner. And it's well known that Chinese consumers are very interested in AI capabilities. So there's a lot of pent-up interest in the iPhone 16 and its AI capabilities. But of course, we saw, there are people saying, hey, look at these China numbers were not great for iPhone. So there's concern that it's slipping there. Now, some of that is due to geopolitical tensions and a focus more on domestic brands in China. But another big part of it is, in fact, the fact that we haven't had Apple Intelligence in China. So there was never a question of if, Apple was going to do it. It was only a question of exactly when and with whom. And so this news suggests it's going to be with Alibaba, who's, they're one of the biggest AI players in China. They're obviously a big household name in China. So it brings together Apple and this important Chinese domestic brand, gets Apple past, the government requirements, which is to work with a Chinese company. So it seems very much like a smart move. Having said that, I also wouldn't be surprised if we see in China Apple doing the same thing they said they would do here in the US. So they announced, for example, AI features with OpenAI here in the US, but then quickly said, but don't forget, we're going to potentially work with others. And they mentioned Google's Gemini, for example. We could see, in fact, that Alibaba is joined by Baidu, who was originally rumored to be working with Apple, and maybe even DeepSeek, right? I mean, so DeepSeek DeepSeek, sorry, it's gotten a lot of attention lately, both here and in China. And so it would be interesting to see if, in fact, Apple decides to go with them at some point down the road. Clearly, Alibaba is going to be coming out of the gate, but there's a lot of different AI features that Apple has, and it could be that they use one company for a certain set of capabilities and another company for another set of capabilities. Wouldn't be surprised at all if that happens, over time.
When do you think, Bob, in terms of timeline, you're an investor, you're listening to this, okay, when would Chinese regulators finally greenlight Apple Intelligence? Gene Munster, and you know Gene, he posted on X today, he said, I believe today's reporting from the information suggests a June or September quarter launch of Apple Intelligence in China. Does that kind of time frame, would that make sense to you, Bob? And when it does, are you in the camp that says, okay, when it does, you would expect to see a meaningful pickup in iPhone demand there?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, I mean, Apple originally said they wanted to have this in April of this year. So clearly, I think that's going to be a little tough to hit. But my guess is it may be closer to June, especially because, look, if it's September, we're already into the iPhone 17, the next generation, right? So logically, I think they're going to want to try and get it into this current iPhone cycle, which would suggest, middle of the year roughly. And as to the impact, yes, I think it will have a relatively meaningful impact. But look, there's a lot of other questions going on. As I mentioned it in my first response there's a lot of geopolitical concerns with how Apple is being thought of and being treated in China. And again, we've seen a lot more focus on domestic brands. Huawei's gotten stronger, Xiaomi's gotten stronger, some of these other major Chinese smartphone companies. And there is some level of concern that will continue to eat away at Apple's share, regardless of what they do with AI. I don't think that's going to happen immediately, but it's certainly a factor I think a lot of people are thinking about. And I think you can't ignore it because it is certainly a possibility.
There's this interesting, you're kind of touching on it, Bob. I was talking to another longtime Apple analyst. He did raise sort of this question about Apple's business in China and whether, as he said to me, there has been perhaps a fundamental shift. And do Chinese consumers now simply move more to the home team, to the domestic brands, to the Huawei's? Do you see that possibly playing out?
I mean, it's already starting to play out, Josh. So yes, I think that is going to happen. Again, the question is the rate at which that happens. Those kinds of big changes often take longer, I think, than some people initially suspect that they will. But again, I think that has already started to happen. And that's why, timing is certainly important. The sooner Apple gets those AI features out there, the better to kind of bring some momentum back to the brand. But these other factors are going on. No question about it. And again, as geopolitical situations change, which we're seeing happen every single day now, that could be a factor as well that really Apple has, unfortunately, very little control over.
Bob, always great to see you talking all things Apple on the show. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Josh.